I started a company by accident and ended up building a business that changed my life, strained my marriage, and ultimately forced me to learn what success really means. In 2017, I was a burned-out account manager at a mid-sized ad agency in Denver. I had a decent salary, a corner cube, and a schedule that allowed me to get home by 6 if I skipped lunch. But I hated it. I hated sitting in meetings where the biggest arguments were about logo placement. I hated massaging egos of clients who believed disruption meant adding emojis to their email subject lines. What I really loved was brewing kombucha. I started messing around with fermentation in 2015 after my doctor recommended I cut back on beer. I bought a cheap starter kit and fell into a rabbit hole. Before long, I had 3 scobies in rotation and a second fridge in the garage dedicated to bottles of homemade mango turmeric brew. One Friday, a coworker named Abby tried some of the stuff I brought in and said, "This is better than GT's. You should sell this." I laughed, but then 2 others chimed in. That weekend, I put together a quick brand concept. Nothing fancy, just a name, a logo, thanks Canva, and an Instagram account. I called it Wild Spark. At first, I just posted aesthetic pictures of my bottles and played around with label ideas. But one of my posts got reshared by a local food blogger, and suddenly my DMs were full of people asking where they could buy it. That gave me a crazy idea. I spent the next 2 weekends brewing a batch big enough for 50 bottles. I slapped labels on them with my home printer and created a pre-order form using Google Forms. I priced them at $6 a bottle, minimum order of 3. I sold out in 3 days. That's when it stopped being a hobby. I didn't quit my job right away. I started moonlighting. I turned my guest bathroom into a sanitized bottling room. I brewed at night, delivered orders in the morning before work. I wore a blazer over my t-shirt stained with hibiscus juice. My wife, Sarah, was confused but supportive. She helped me pack orders and even designed my first real website. By early 2018, I was making $2,000/month from kombucha, still working full-time, and starting to think this could be something more. The turning point came when a small health food shop called Fresh Haven emailed me out of the blue. They wanted to carry Wild Spark on consignment. I agreed, delivered 40 bottles, and they sold out in a week. I was hooked. In July 2018, I left my job. It wasn't glamorous. I had just $12,000 saved, no warehouse, and my team was me, Sarah, and a high school kid who helped with deliveries. I leased a 400 square feet commercial kitchen and started working 70-hour weeks. I brewed, bottled, cold-called cafes, dropped off samples at yoga studios, and handed out flyers at farmers markets. Growth was slow. Then, one lucky day in January 2019, a Whole Foods regional buyer visited Fresh Haven, tried a bottle of Wild Spark, and contacted me. They were interested in carrying it in 6 stores as part of a local vendor program. I thought I'd won the lottery. Of course, I had no idea how to scale production, maintain consistency, or manage distributor relationships. The next 6 months were chaos. I had to find a co-packer fast, get UPC codes, insurance, negotiate shelf space, deal with inventory spoilage, and figure out how to fund all of this. I took out a $50,000 line of credit, maxed out 2 cards, and stopped paying myself. Sarah was anxious. Our savings dwindled. I missed a family wedding. I forgot our anniversary. Once, I fell asleep at a red light. But by December 2019, Wild Spark was in 23 stores, doing about $35K/month in revenue, and I had hired 2 part-time employees. It was the biggest high of my life. Until the pandemic hit. March 2020 wiped out half our retail orders. Cafes closed, and demos, our biggest growth channel, were banned. I thought we were finished. I considered shutting everything down. Then, unexpectedly, online sales started to pick up. People stuck at home wanted healthier drink options. A wellness influencer in LA posted a glowing review of our ginger lime flavor, and sales tripled overnight. We pivoted hard into DTC. I rebuilt the website, offered subscriptions, partnered with a local fulfillment center, and started doing Instagram lives to engage customers. By mid-2021, we were pulling in $100K/month with a 35% margin, and I'd finally raised a seed round, $400,000 from an angel investor who believed in clean food brands. For the first time in my life, I had a runway. I moved into a 3,000 square feet facility, hired a head of operations, and signed a distribution deal that brought us into Sprouts. From the outside, it looked like a rocket ship. But inside, I was falling apart. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. My marriage was hanging by a thread. I was drinking too much coffee, eating nothing but protein bars, and snapping at my team. One night, Sarah told me she didn't recognize me anymore. I realized I'd become the same type of obsessive, joyless boss I used to hate. I took a step back, hired a general manager, started therapy, recommitted to 1 night a week with no work. I remembered why I started Wild Spark in the first place, not to chase hypergrowth, but to make something real, something nourishing. I started visiting farmers markets again just to talk to customers. I brought back small batch experiments. I smiled more. Today, Wild Spark is in 180 stores across 6 states. We've launched 3 new flavors and a sparkling probiotic tea line. We're profitable. I'm still CEO, but I work more like 45 hours a week. I take weekends off. Sarah and I just came back from a vacation in Lisbon. First one in 5 years. The company didn't make me rich overnight. It didn't get me on Shark Tank. But it gave me something much more valuable: purpose, independence, and the ability to build something with integrity. I made peace with the fact that Wild Spark may never be a $100M brand, and that's okay. Not all entrepreneurship needs to look like tech IPOs and exit multiples. Sometimes it's just about building something weird, good, and your own, and being able to sit down at the end of the day with a bottle of your own brew, take a sip, and feel proud of what you made. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never thought selling buttons would make me $1.4 million. The whole thing started because of a breakup. I was 32, broke, and living in a studio apartment above a laundromat in Denver. My girlfriend of 3 years dumped me because, in her words, I was more committed to random projects than our future. She wasn't wrong. I tried launching a sock subscription box, a vintage video game flipping hustle, and even a short-lived food truck that served Korean pancakes. Nothing worked. After the breakup, I spiraled for a bit. I worked nights as a bartender and spent the days watching YouTube, feeling sorry for myself. One random Tuesday, I was scrolling through Etsy to find a gift for my niece, and I noticed this seller who had these colorful resin buttons, handmade stuff, customized. The listing had like 3,000 reviews. I don't know why, but I clicked. I fell into a rabbit hole of button makers. Wooden buttons, clay buttons, personalized baby's first sweater buttons. Niche as hell, but it was all weirdly compelling. That night, I started researching how hard it would be to make buttons. Turns out, not that hard. I bought a resin kit, some molds, dyes, and glitter. My first buttons looked like crap, full of bubbles and inconsistent shapes, but I posted them on Instagram anyway. 1 like from my mom, but I kept going. Every day I made new sets. I posted better photos, joined Facebook groups for knitters, quilters, and people who made handmade clothes. I sent free samples to 5 sewing influencers I found on YouTube. One of them, a woman named Julia with 80K subscribers, actually replied. She featured my buttons in a Sew With Me video. The next day, I woke up to 147 orders on Etsy. I didn't even have 50 sets ready. I pulled 2 all-nighters casting resin, sanding, and shipping. The first week, I made $900. I remember crying at my kitchen sink while cleaning the mixing cups. Not because of the money exactly, but because for the first time something clicked. I called the shop Tiny Montana, a name I pulled from a random lyric, and leaned hard into the branding: wholesome, handmade, slightly nostalgic. I added little handwritten thank you notes with each order. The buttons got better. I made themed sets, mushrooms, 90s cartoons, holiday packs. People ate them up. Within 3 months, I had 12,000 followers on Instagram, a mailing list of 4,000, and a problem I never had before: too many orders. I hired my old roommate, Sarah, to help with fulfillment. She'd been laid off and knew how to handle e-commerce stuff better than I did. She streamlined everything: labels, order tracking, customer service. I focused on making buttons. We moved into a shared studio space with actual ventilation. Resin fumes aren't great when you're working for 10 hours straight. 6 months in, a buyer from a big chain craft store messaged me. They wanted a wholesale order, 10,000 buttons across 25 designs. I freaked out. At that point, we could only make about 300 buttons a day between the two of us. I turned them down, but it lit a fire. I researched manufacturers. I found a small batch production partner in North Carolina who could replicate my designs using non-toxic resin and even add eco-friendly packaging. It took 3 months and $20,000 of my savings, plus a small loan from my dad. But when we relaunched with scalable production, it was a different ballgame. I redid the website, started running Facebook and Pinterest ads, and launched a subscription box for button collectors. Yes, that's a thing. By the end of the first year, we'd made $210,000 in revenue. I paid off my debts, moved out of the laundromat apartment, and hired 3 full-time employees. The part that still amazes me is how loyal the crafting community is. People send us photos of their finished projects, baby sweaters, wedding gifts, quilts, and they thank us for being part of their story. That's when I knew I wasn't just selling buttons. I was part of something way bigger, a community of people who still care about handmade things. Year 2, we expanded into pins and fasteners. Not huge growth, but enough to diversify. A viral TikTok, not even posted by us, brought in a flood of new orders and nearly crashed the site. Revenue jumped to $780,000. We got featured in a BuzzFeed article called 13 Incredibly Specific Small Businesses You'll Fall in Love With. Corny? Sure. But it brought us 20K new followers. We crossed $1.4 million in revenue this March. I still get up at 5:30 every morning and check every new review. It's a habit now. I write down the names of customers who come back more than 5 times and personally email them. Not because I have to, but because it reminds me why I started. The funny thing is, people always ask me, did you know it was going to work? Hell no. I was just desperate, lonely, and trying to keep my hands busy. But I found something weird and joyful that people loved, and I stayed with it long enough for it to become real. And the ex? She reached out about a year ago, said she was happy for me, that she always believed I'd figure something out. We met for coffee. It was good, normal. Then she asked if I'd ever considered making buttons shaped like vintage records. I told her I'd think about it. I haven't, but maybe one day. I never planned to be an entrepreneur. If you had asked me 5 years ago where I saw myself, I'd have said, in middle management, probably. I had a solid job in IT consulting, a mortgage, a partner who worked in public health, and a routine that gave me just enough flexibility to feel like I wasn't dying slowly. It was all fine. But then my mom died. She had pancreatic cancer. By the time they caught it, it was a matter of months. I was flying back and forth between Seattle and St. Louis every other week, managing her care, talking to doctors, dealing with insurance, and watching this woman who once ran a local bakery for 15 years slowly disappear. She used to tell me stories about how she started that bakery, how she made flyers by hand and bribed the local post office guy with muffins to help distribute them. I think it was the first time I really respected how hard she'd worked. It wasn't just a small business. It was her entire identity. After she passed, I found a journal she kept during the bakery years. Some pages had recipes and cost breakdowns for ingredients. Others were rants about customers or supplier drama. But a few were just raw thoughts, frustration, doubt, pride. I read every page. Twice. I quit my job 3 weeks later. Everyone thought I was having a grief breakdown. Maybe I was. But something about what she built, even if it was just muffins and coffee, made me feel like I was wasting time. I had saved enough to float for about 9 to 12 months if I lived cheaply. So I gave myself a deadline. If I couldn't build something profitable within that time, I'd go back to corporate life. I didn't know what I was building yet. I just knew I wanted it to matter. And I wanted it to feel real. I started talking to local business owners in Seattle, cafes, laundromats, small bookstores, just buying them coffee and asking questions. The recurring pain point? Inventory and supply ordering. Not for big chains, but for these mom-and-pop places who still use spreadsheets and post-its to keep track of stock. One guy had 3 different vendor portals and faxed orders for certain supplies. Faxed. In 2020. So I started working on a simple dashboard, a SaaS tool that would let small businesses input their suppliers, items, order cycles, and track usage. Eventually, it could suggest orders or automate them entirely. I called it Loopline because I thought it sounded techy and cool. It didn't, but I rolled with it. I spent 5 months building it alone. No co-founder. No team. I used off-the-shelf frameworks and scrappy code. I begged a couple of coffee shops to test it. Most said no. One said yes. That shop was owned by a couple in Ballard, Andy and Sunita, who were running themselves ragged. When I showed them the dashboard, they didn't understand half of it. But they liked that I was listening. So I installed it for them and spent the next 6 weeks tweaking the UI and making changes based on how they worked, not how I thought they should. And then something happened. They told another shop owner, who told another. And then a bookstore called me, and a small florist. Within 4 months, I had 12 clients. They were paying me a small subscription fee, $39/month each. I wasn't getting rich, but I was getting traction. More importantly, I was learning exactly what this niche needed. I scrapped my original interface, redesigned everything from scratch, and got a friend from my consulting days to help on front end for equity. We started calling our clients weekly. Just 15-minute calls, asking what they needed. We took notes. We iterated. We didn't sleep much. By the end of the first year, Loopline had 112 paying businesses. And then the pandemic hit. Half of them closed. I wanted to give up. I was sitting on a couch in my tiny apartment, watching my revenue evaporate. But something weird happened. The businesses that stayed open relied on Loopline more. Because now they were juggling new suppliers, fluctuating stock, weird delivery timelines. One user told me, if this app goes down, I'm screwed. I didn't cry, but I came close. I waived all fees for any business that asked. About 40% took the offer. Some paid me anyway. I didn't ask why. That year, we made $28,000 in revenue. I lived off ramen and the last of my savings. But we survived. The following year, businesses started reopening. New ones emerged, ones run by people who'd been laid off and were starting something on their own. They came looking for tools. Loopline doubled in users. In year 3, I raised a tiny angel round, $150K from a friend of a friend who ran a logistics company and saw potential. That let me hire a full-time engineer and a support rep. We hit $500K ARR, annual recurring revenue, last year. This year, we're tracking toward $1.1 million. But that's not the most satisfying part. Last month, Andy and Sunita invited me to their daughter's birthday. They said the cafe is finally turning a real profit. They even opened a second location. And they still use Loopline every morning to check their standing orders. I know it's just an app. I know I'm not curing cancer. But when I walk into one of our client shops and see our interface on a tablet by the register, I feel like I've built something that matters. Not because it makes money, because someone depends on it, because it makes their day easier, because it keeps a small business from going under, and maybe, in some way, because it honors the woman who used to write down muffin costs and staffing schedules in the margins of a spiral-bound notebook. I still have that notebook on my desk. Every now and then, I flip to the page where she wrote, in all caps, "Keep going even when it sucks." That's been my motto ever since. I'm 34 now. 8 years ago, I was working in a cubicle at a mid-sized accounting firm in Minneapolis. My job was safe, stable, and soul-sucking. The highlight of my day was using my second monitor to secretly scroll Reddit, where I'd read about people launching startups, failing gloriously, and sometimes even making it. One afternoon, after my third cup of burnt coffee and yet another spreadsheet correction, I stumbled on a post from someone who had just sold their Etsy-based candle business for mid-6 figures. The candles weren't even fancy, just well-branded, with a clean website and great photos. I remember thinking, why am I doing tax codes when I could be doing anything else? That night, I went home and wrote down 3 ideas. One was a dog treat subscription box, already too saturated. The second was a peer-to-peer storage app, logistics nightmare. The third was socks. Customized socks. Specifically, socks with your pet's face printed on them. The idea was dumb enough to maybe work. It was simple, fun, and I hadn't seen it done well yet. I called it Posy. I knew absolutely nothing about e-commerce or product sourcing. So I did what any corporate drone would do. I built a PowerPoint deck for myself. Then I Googled the hell out of everything. I found a Chinese supplier on Alibaba that could do custom print-on-demand socks. I ordered a sample with my roommate's cat's face on it. When it came in the mail 3 weeks later, I laughed out loud. It was ridiculous, but also kind of awesome. I spent $180 on a Shopify site. I made a logo in Canva. My photo shoot, was just my roommate modeling the cat socks on our IKEA couch. I launched with zero fanfare and posted on Reddit, Instagram, and a couple of pet subreddits. Nothing happened. No orders for the first week. Then one. From someone in Oregon. I had no idea who they were. They had ordered 2 pairs. I danced around the apartment like I'd won the lottery. I messaged the supplier and paid for a rush order. It took 2 weeks to get to the customer, and they left a 4-star review saying great socks, but slow delivery. That stung. But they posted a picture of the socks on their dog's Instagram account. That led to 3 more orders. Then 7 the next week. I started reinvesting every dollar into ads and better packaging. By month 4, I was getting around 60 orders a week. It was still a side hustle, but a promising one. My boss started noticing I was distracted. I was doing sock customer support during lunch breaks, photo editing in Excel, don't judge, and constantly refreshing my sales dashboard. One Friday, I walked into his office and quit. I had $7 for 100 in the bank, a credit card with a $10,000 limit, and a dream of socks. The next 6 months were chaos. The supplier made mistakes, sent the wrong prints, and sometimes ghosted me. One customer got a sock with someone else's dog on it. I refunded them, apologized, and cried in the shower. But every mistake taught me something. I switched suppliers, found a local fulfillment center, and started automating parts of the site. I began running micro-influencer campaigns, paying small pet accounts $25 to post about Posy. The return was insane. One French bulldog in Atlanta brought in $12,000 in sales over 2 weeks. I hired a freelance designer to create fun sock templates. Business was booming. By year 2, we crossed $600K in annual revenue. I hired my first employee, my cousin Becca, who was way better at operations than I was. We ran it out of a co-working space that smelled like burned coffee and ambition. Then came the knockoff wave. Suddenly, my Facebook ads were swamped with copycat sites using stolen images. Some even used our logo, word for word. Customers got scammed and blamed us. I was furious. I lawyered up, issued takedown notices, and made a YouTube video showing how to spot fake sites. But the damage hurt. Sales dipped. Our reputation took a hit. We fought back by doubling down on authenticity. We started a Posy rescue program, 10% of profits when a dog shelters. We let customers add their rescue story at checkout and featured them on our Instagram. That year, we hit $1.2 million in sales. Then, during the pandemic, something wild happened. One of our socks went viral on TikTok. A girl made a 12-second video showing how she surprised her boyfriend with socks of his dog that had passed away. It hit 3 million views in a week. We were flooded with orders. Our site crashed. I had to call Shopify support in tears at 2 a.m. We hired 3 temps just to handle customer service. Sales that month? $280K. Net profit $86K. I paid off my credit card. I bought my mom a new car. And I finally took a vacation for 3 days before freaking out and checking Slack the whole time. By year 5, we had 6 employees, 2 full-time artists, and our own warehouse in St. Paul. Posy was no longer a side hustle. It was a real company. But here's the twist. I started to fall out of love with it. Don't get me wrong. I was grateful. Posy gave me everything. But the joy was fading. I was running reports, fixing HR issues, and managing supply chain drama. I missed the early chaos. The late nights editing sock faces. The excitement of that first order from Oregon. So I did something most people thought was nuts. I sold the company. A small DTC brand aggregator made an offer $3.4 million, structured as $2 million upfront, the rest in performance earnouts. I took it. After taxes, lawyers, and bonuses for the team, I walked away with just under $1.7 million. I didn't buy a Lamborghini. I didn't move to Bali. I took 6 months off. Read books. Slept in. Built a PC. Volunteered. And then, one morning over coffee, I got another stupid idea. That story's just starting. But Posy? It was the best mistake I ever made. If you're stuck in a job you hate, here's my advice. Your first idea doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be real. It needs to exist. That's it. Make it. Launch it. Let the world kick it around. Then learn, improve, and maybe, just maybe, you'll end up selling socks with cats on them for a living. I remember the first time I ever saw an opportunity in front of me. It wasn't flashy, it didn't come with a multi-million-dollar investment, and no one was there to hand me a blueprint for success. It was, in fact, a small, awkward moment that didn't feel significant at all at first. It started in 2015 when I was 25. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing, and like so many fresh graduates, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had worked a couple of internships during school, dabbled in some side hustles, and spent my nights trying to get a feel for the entrepreneurial life. But nothing felt solid, and nothing made me feel like I had a real chance at success. I moved back to my hometown, trying to figure out my next move. I had a bit of savings in the bank from some freelance work, but I was living in a small apartment, doing freelance social media management for local businesses. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely didn't fulfill me. But then, one day, something random happened. I was scrolling through Instagram when I came across a post about a small, niche product that someone had created. It wasn't a game changer, but it was an innovative take on something people had been using for years. It was a personalized phone case company. I thought, this is a simple idea. Why not try it myself? I had no experience in design or manufacturing, and honestly, I barely knew how to create a website. But I wasn't afraid of learning. I spent hours online researching how to get started, reading blogs, watching tutorials, and connecting with a few people in the entrepreneurial world who had done something similar. I decided to make it happen. My first step was to find a reliable supplier for phone cases. I didn't want to create the designs myself at first. I wasn't confident in my abilities, and I figured I could always outsource the designs later. I found a manufacturer in China who could print custom designs on phone cases. The catch was that they had a minimum order quantity, which I couldn't afford. But I was determined. So, I started small. I created a website using Shopify and designed a few basic, minimalist phone cases. They weren't anything special, but they were good enough for the beginning. I spent a few weeks reaching out to my network and marketing to local friends and family. I offered discounted cases in exchange for testimonials and shared the website on social media, hoping to attract a few early customers. At first, nothing happened. I got a couple of orders here and there, but nothing significant. The website felt stagnant. I was discouraged but kept pushing. I started experimenting with Facebook ads, targeting specific demographics and testing out different copy. Eventually, after several weeks of tweaking, I got my first real wave of customers. It wasn't a flood, but it was enough to get me excited. One of the major breakthroughs came when I realized that people love the idea of custom, personalized products. I expanded the product line to include custom phone cases with people's names, favorite quotes, or even photos. I started seeing some traction, and customers began to leave positive reviews. Slowly, word of mouth spread. I had a loyal customer base, even if it was small. But I was still unsure about scaling. At this point, I was managing everything: designs, customer service, social media marketing, order fulfillment, everything. I was working from dawn till dusk, and I could feel burnout creeping in. There was no way I could handle everything long-term, so I had to make a tough decision. I decided to hire someone to help with customer service so I could focus on growing the business. That was a game changer. It wasn't easy to let go of some of the tasks I had been doing, but I realized that I needed to focus on scaling. So, I put together a team: a freelance graphic designer who helped with custom designs, a virtual assistant who handled customer service, and a social media manager who helped run ads and engage with customers online. With the help of this team, my business began to grow rapidly. I could finally invest in better marketing, and I started diversifying the product line. We introduced personalized phone cases for more phone models, added custom laptop skins, and even launched a new product line that allowed customers to design their own phone accessories, like pop sockets and charging cables. But the real breakthrough came when I realized I needed to create an experience around the brand. I wanted people to feel like they weren't just buying a product, but becoming part of something. So we started offering limited edition designs, collaborating with influencers and artists, and even launching seasonal collections. This made the business feel more like a community than just a store. By 2017, we had turned a modest operation into a six-figure business. The feedback I received from customers was overwhelmingly positive. I wasn't just selling phone cases, I was selling memories. People were putting photos of their families, pets, and loved ones on their cases, and it felt special. But just when I thought things were going smoothly, I faced a massive setback. The manufacturer I had been working with for years suddenly stopped responding to my orders. My entire supply chain was thrown into disarray, and I had hundreds of orders waiting to be fulfilled. I was devastated. The thought of letting down my customers was terrifying. I spent days frantically searching for another supplier, trying to find someone who could meet our quality and price requirements. After what felt like forever, I finally found a new manufacturer, but it took a few months to rebuild the trust with customers and fulfill the backlogged orders. This experience taught me two major lessons. First, the importance of diversifying your suppliers, and second, how resilient a brand can become when you focus on delivering a good customer experience. By 2018, the company was back on track. We had expanded into international markets, and I was able to quit my day job for good. The phone case business became more than just a side hustle. It became my full-time job, my career, and eventually, my passion. I had built something from nothing, and while it wasn't always easy, every step of the journey had taught me something valuable. Fast forward to today. My company has grown into a multi-million-dollar business, and while I never set out to build a huge empire, I'm proud of what I've created. We've now branched into other custom products, and we're working on some exciting new projects. There's a part of me that still can't believe it all started with a simple idea for personalized phone cases. Looking back, I realized that the key to my success wasn't the product itself. It was the willingness to take that first step, to not give up when things got hard, and to stay focused on building something that mattered to people. Entrepreneurship isn't about having a perfect plan. It's about perseverance, learning from failures, and, most importantly, never stopping. The journey wasn't easy, but every struggle made the success so much sweeter. And if you're reading this, wondering if you should take that leap, I say go for it. The first step is always the hardest, but it could very well lead to something incredible. The rise of my online business. From $200 to six figures in 1 year, it all started in a tiny, cramped apartment with a broken laptop and a stack of bills that kept piling up. I had just quit my 9-to-5 job in retail after realizing that I wasn't going anywhere. I was stuck in the same cycle, working long hours just to pay rent, and my dream of being my own boss seemed further out of reach than ever. I was desperate for a change, but I didn't have a lot of money to start anything substantial. It was the middle of the pandemic, and everyone seemed to be talking about starting an online business. I was skeptical at first. Who would buy anything from a new website that looked like it was put together in a basement, right? But I was at rock bottom, so I decided to dive in, even if I had no idea where to start. I'd heard about dropshipping, the low-risk, no-inventory business model where you sell products from suppliers without holding any stock. It sounded too good to be true, but I figured, why not give it a try? With only $200 to my name, that was all I could afford to lose. The first step was learning about the business. I spent days watching YouTube tutorials and reading every blog post I could find on dropshipping. I realized there was a lot to figure out: selecting a niche, finding suppliers, building a website, and marketing my products. It all felt overwhelming, but I was determined to give it my best shot. After some research, I decided to sell fitness products. Why? Because the pandemic had made home workouts more popular than ever. People were looking for ways to stay fit at home, and I saw an opportunity to ride that wave. I chose a niche within the fitness industry, resistance bands and home gym equipment, and started searching for suppliers. I found a reliable supplier on AliExpress with decent reviews, and I thought it would be a good place to start. Next, I built a website. I used Shopify, which had a free trial at the time, and customized it as best as I could. The design wasn't anything fancy, but I wanted it to look professional and trustworthy. I learned how to add product pages, set prices, and manage orders. The technical side was a challenge, but I figured it out by Googling every issue that popped up. My website went live, and it was time to start marketing. Now, here's where I made my first big mistake. I thought I could just launch my store and wait for the sales to roll in. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. I realized quickly that having a website didn't mean anything if nobody knew about it. So, I turned to Facebook ads, thinking it was the best way to drive traffic. I spent $50 on ads, targeting fitness enthusiasts and home workout groups. I figured that with such a targeted audience, I'd get some sales. But my ad campaign bombed. I didn't know how to write good ad copy, and the ad itself wasn't visually appealing. I didn't even have a good call to action. It was a complete failure, and I lost all $50. I was devastated. I thought I had wasted my money, and I almost gave up. But then I remembered something important. I didn't have much to lose. My $200 was almost gone, but I still had time to turn things around. I went back to the drawing board and realized I needed to learn more about running ads before wasting any more money. I enrolled in a course on Facebook advertising, where I learned about creating high-converting ads, targeting the right audience, and A/B testing. I also started experimenting with Instagram and Google Ads, trying to find the best platform for my business. Slowly, I began to see results. My conversion rate improved, and I was able to generate enough traffic to start making some sales. It wasn't much at first. I'd get a sale here and there, but it was enough to keep me motivated. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, upgrading my website, improving my ads, and adding new products. Slowly, I built a small but loyal customer base. Word of mouth began to spread, and I started to see more and more orders coming in. By month 3, I was consistently making around $500 a week in revenue. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to quit my part-time job and focus on my online business full-time. I still wasn't living large, but I was finally in control of my own schedule. I had the freedom to work from home, and I could focus on growing my business without the constant stress of a soul-sucking job. Around month 6, I started experimenting with influencer marketing. I reached out to fitness influencers on Instagram and offered them a free product in exchange for a shout-out. To my surprise, several influencers agreed to work with me. They posted about my products, and suddenly, my brand had more visibility than ever before. With influencer marketing and paid ads working in tandem, I began to see a serious increase in sales. By month 9, I had hit my first $10,000 month. I couldn't believe it. I had made more money in 1 month than I ever had at my old job. I was on cloud 9, but I knew I couldn't stop there. I needed to keep scaling. I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service and order fulfillment, which freed up my time to focus on growing the business. I also expanded my product line to include a wider range of fitness gear and accessories. I worked on improving my website, making it more user-friendly, and even launched a blog to drive organic traffic. By the time the 1-year mark hit, my business was making over $30,000 a month in revenue. I had surpassed 6 figures in sales, and I could hardly believe how far I had come. From the $200 I started with to a full-fledged online business that was providing me with financial freedom, I had built something from nothing. But the road wasn't always easy. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and many failed attempts. But the key to success was persistence. I didn't give up after my first failed ad campaign, and I didn't throw in the towel when things seemed tough. I kept learning, adapting, and improving. Now, I'm in the process of scaling even further. I've hired a small team to help with customer service, product sourcing, and marketing. I'm working on automating as much of the business as possible so I can focus on new opportunities. I still can't believe where I've ended up, but I'm proud of what I've built. Looking back, I realized that my success wasn't about having a big budget or fancy resources. It was about having the willingness to learn, adapt, and persevere. If I could go from $200 to 6 figures in 1 year, I believe anyone can do it, as long as they're ready to put in the work and never give up. So, to anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, go for it. Don't wait for the perfect time. If you have an idea and the determination to make it work, the sky's the limit. I may have started with nothing, but now I have everything I need to continue building my dream. And that's worth more than any paycheck could ever be. It was late in 2015 when I decided to launch my business. I had just left my comfortable job as a software engineer at a well-established tech company. I was sitting at my desk one morning, staring at the screen, knowing that the work I was doing was good, but it wasn't the work I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I'd spent the last few years building other people's dreams, and I knew it was time to start focusing on my own. To understand how I got here, you need to know that I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were both teachers, and growing up, the idea of becoming an entrepreneur was a far-off dream that I barely understood. I'd always been the technical kid, into computers, coding, and solving problems. My journey had been all about finding the fastest way to build things. It wasn't until after I graduated and worked in the tech industry that I started feeling a bit restless. I had everything I needed, but I didn't feel fulfilled. I had this nagging sense that there was something bigger out there, something that I was meant to do. The real shift came when I met a group of entrepreneurs at a local networking event. I was there, thinking I might learn something new about my industry, but what I found was a group of people who were driven by passion and purpose. They weren't talking about the next line of code or the coolest new tech. They were talking about solving real-world problems, creating value, and building something that could last. They were speaking a language I didn't understand but desperately wanted to learn. That night, I walked away with a single thought: I can do this. It wasn't long before I had the idea for my startup. I wanted to create an app that would help small businesses with managing their inventory. The problem was that most of the inventory management software on the market was either overly complicated or far too expensive for the small guys. I'd been working with inventory systems in my engineering job and knew there had to be a better, more affordable way to do it. I had no business experience at this point, just a few ideas, a lot of technical knowledge, and a burning desire to make this work. So I dove in. The first step was designing the app. I spent months building the MVP, minimum viable product, on nights and weekends. I had a full-time job during the day, so I'd come home, grab some food, and get to work. I didn't sleep much. My friends and family thought I was crazy, but I knew this was my shot. When the MVP was ready, I started reaching out to small business owners. I didn't have a big budget for marketing, so I relied on cold emailing and personal connections. I offered free trials in exchange for feedback, which was invaluable. The first few months were tough. I had a lot of rejections, but I also had a few people who saw the potential. One of them, a local bookstore owner, was the first person who told me, "This works, and I want to pay for it." That was a turning point for me. It validated everything. I didn't have a business plan at the time, just a product I believed in. But as more people started using the app, I realized I had to start learning the business side of things. I read books, took online courses, and networked with other entrepreneurs. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. I had to figure out pricing, how to scale, how to manage customers, how to keep the product running smoothly. There were a lot of late nights, but every time I overcame a challenge, it felt like a small victory. The real breakthrough came about a year into the journey. I had been working with a handful of small businesses, but I knew to make this sustainable, I needed to expand. So I reached out to a few influencers in the business world, people who had the attention of small business owners. I offered them a demo of the app, and to my surprise, a few of them agreed to take a look. One of them, a well-known YouTube personality who created content around entrepreneurship, featured my app in one of their videos. The response was overwhelming. Within days, I had hundreds of new signups. I won't sugarcoat it, though. There were still plenty of hurdles. As the business started to grow, I needed to hire my first employee. I was terrified. I didn't know what I was doing. But after many interviews, I found someone who not only had the right technical skills, but also understood the vision. That first hire was crucial. With their help, I was able to focus more on growing the business while they handled a lot of the day-to-day operations. By the end of 2017, the company had grown to the point where I was able to quit my job and focus full-time on the startup. It was a surreal moment, but also terrifying. Going from a stable income to relying solely on the company's success was a huge leap. But by that point, I had enough clients, enough revenue, and enough confidence to make the jump. That year was when everything really took off. We started expanding our features, adding more integrations, and focusing on customer support. I also started speaking at events, sharing my story, and learning from others. The more I talked to people, the more I realized that running a business wasn't just about having a great product. It was about building relationships, being adaptable, and constantly learning. By 2019, the company was profitable. We had a solid team, a growing customer base, and a vision for the future. It wasn't always smooth sailing, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but the journey had taught me invaluable lessons. The most important one: patience. Building a business takes time, and the process is messy. You have to be ready to face rejection, failure, and doubt. But if you stick with it, stay true to your vision, and keep learning, the rewards are worth it. As I write this in 2025, my business is in a good place. We're expanding into new markets. We've built strong partnerships, and we're helping thousands of small businesses across the world. There are still challenges, of course. We're always evolving, always adapting to new technologies and customer needs. But looking back at how far we've come, it feels like the most rewarding decision I ever made. I didn't take a traditional path to entrepreneurship, and there's no one-size-fits-all formula for success. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you have to be willing to take risks, work hard, and stay focused on your goals. Every step, even the mistakes, taught me something valuable. And now, I'm just as passionate about helping others take that leap and pursue their own entrepreneurial dreams as I am about growing my business. If you're thinking about starting your own venture, take the plunge. The road won't always be easy, but trust me, it's worth it. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the right conditions. Sometimes you just have to jump in and figure it out along the way. There's no better time than now. I'll be honest, I didn't have the best start. Growing up, my family wasn't poor, but we were far from rich. My parents were both teachers, so there was always enough to get by, but that was about it. No lavish vacations, no brand new cars, and definitely no luxuries. From a young age, I had a strong sense of wanting more for myself, more for my future, more than what I was seeing around me. In high school, I was always the one hustling in the background. I didn't have a big idea yet, but I knew that I had to find a way to make money. I wasn't interested in a 9-to-5 job. I had no desire to work for someone else. I remember my first real taste of entrepreneurship came when I was 16. I started selling phone accessories on eBay. It was nothing special, just cheap cases, chargers, and earphones. I didn't make a ton of money, but I learned the basics of supply and demand, shipping logistics, and customer service. It was a crash course in the real world, and I loved every minute of it. The idea that I could make money without working under someone's thumb was intoxicating. The next big jump came when I turned 18. I'd been spending time with a friend who was into photography and videography. He showed me the ropes of camera gear, editing, and even social media marketing. I realized that there was potential in the online space, especially when it came to building a personal brand. So, I bought a cheap DSLR camera on Craigslist and started offering photography services for events and parties. My pricing was ridiculously low, but it didn't matter. I was hungry, and I wanted to build something. Slowly but surely, I started gaining a reputation for being the guy to hire if you wanted affordable and professional-looking photos. At the time, my goal wasn't to create a massive photography business. I was just experimenting. But after a year of working with clients and posting my work online, I started getting inquiries from bigger clients. I remember my first big gig was a local startup who wanted me to shoot their new product for their website. I charged them $500, which felt like an absurd amount of money for just a few hours of work. But I did it, and it opened my eyes to the possibility of turning this side hustle into something much more. Around this time, I decided to go to college, though not because I was excited about higher education. I went because it seemed like the right thing to do. I had no idea what I wanted to major in. I ended up picking business because it felt practical, but I didn't really connect with the curriculum. That's when I got serious about building my side hustle. I realized that school wasn't going to teach me the things I needed to know, so I started surrounding myself with entrepreneurs. I took every chance I could to attend networking events, even though I was incredibly shy. But each conversation, no matter how awkward, brought me closer to understanding what it really meant to run a business. After a couple of years of grinding away, my photography side hustle turned into something more solid. I wasn't just doing events anymore. I was getting hired to shoot commercials, produce branded content, and even edit short films for local businesses. My income was starting to increase, and I started building a small team to help with the workload. I brought on a couple of editors, a few photographers, and even a social media manager. But with growth came challenges. As my business expanded, so did the complexity. I had to figure out how to manage finances, taxes, contracts, and, most importantly, how to scale without losing quality. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to make it work. Here's where the story took an unexpected turn. The 2020 pandemic hit. Everything came to a grinding halt. All of my contracts were canceled in a matter of days. It was a harsh reality check. The next couple of months were dark. I considered going back to a full-time job. I had no idea how I would survive without clients, but I kept reminding myself that I had to adapt. That's when I pivoted. I noticed that businesses, while not hiring for in-person work, were still looking for content. They still needed help with social media marketing, online ads, and virtual events. So, I rebranded my business. I transitioned from offering only photography to becoming a full-fledged digital marketing agency. I learned quickly about running Facebook ads, Instagram campaigns, and Google advertising. I hired a few more people with expertise in these areas and set out to help businesses adjust to the new normal. It was a tough transition, and there were many sleepless nights. But it paid off. In the next 18 months, my business went from a small photography side hustle to a digital marketing agency with a steady stream of clients from all over the country. I started hiring more full-time employees, expanding the team, and even securing long-term contracts with some pretty big brands. By the end of 2021, I was making more than I ever thought was possible. And the best part was that I was in complete control of my destiny. Looking back, there were countless times I almost gave up, when I felt like nothing was working, when I doubted myself, when I thought it would be easier to just quit. But each time, something kept me going. It wasn't always some big revelation or magical idea. It was a combination of stubbornness, resilience, and a willingness to learn from every failure. Now, I've got a growing agency with clients in multiple industries, a team of talented professionals, and a lifestyle that gives me the freedom I've always wanted. But none of it would have happened if I didn't take that first step, if I didn't start selling phone accessories on eBay at 16, or take that first camera shot when I was just trying to make some side cash. The journey hasn't been smooth, but I wouldn't change a thing. I went from being a kid who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life to running a business that provides jobs for others and allows me to live life on my terms. If you're out there thinking it's too late to start, or you don't have the resources, or you don't know where to begin, just take the first step. The rest will follow. It won't be easy, but that's the point. If it were easy, everyone would do it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I always thought I had my life planned out. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the idea of success was simple. Get good grades, go to college, get a decent job, and start a family. I was on that path for a while. But sometimes, life has a funny way of changing your direction when you least expect it. In high school, I was the classic overachiever. I was president of the student council, captain of the debate team, and I worked part-time at the local coffee shop. I had a dream of going to a top-tier university, getting my degree, and landing a corporate job where I could climb the ladder. Everything was going according to plan until the moment it wasn't. I got accepted to a prestigious college and moved to a big city to start my new life. But soon after I arrived, I realized something. I hated it. The city was big, noisy, and overwhelming. The people seemed to have their own lives, and I was just a small cog in a machine that didn't seem to care whether I existed. I began questioning everything. Why was I following this path? Was this what I truly wanted? I spent the next year of my life trying to fit in, but deep down, I felt like an outsider. I had friends, sure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't living for myself. I was living to meet everyone else's expectations. I dropped out of college after my second year. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. That's when the idea came. It wasn't a grand, revolutionary moment of inspiration. It was more of a quiet realization. I was good at problem solving, and I loved finding creative solutions to everyday issues. I started brainstorming and writing down ideas. I had always been a tech geek, spending hours tinkering with software and gadgets. But I had no formal training in coding, business, or any of the things that would typically help someone start a tech company. All I had was a burning desire to create something that could make a difference. The idea was simple. I wanted to create an app that would help people organize their lives more efficiently. There were tons of productivity apps out there, but none that truly felt intuitive and flexible enough for the average person. So, I decided to build my own. The first few months were brutal. I had no money to invest in this idea, so I started by reading as much as I could about coding and software development. I spent sleepless nights watching tutorials on YouTube, reading blogs, and learning from online courses. The process was slow, and at times, I thought about giving up. But there was something about the idea that kept me going. Every time I thought about quitting, I would remember how much I hated the idea of settling for a life that wasn't mine. After a few months, I had the first prototype of my app. It was nothing fancy, just a basic version with limited functionality, but it was enough to get started. I showed it to a few friends and family members, and their feedback was mostly positive, which encouraged me to keep going. But building the app was just the beginning. Now I needed users. I had no budget for marketing or advertising, so I started reaching out to people on social media. I joined forums and Facebook groups, offering to let people test the app for free. At first, it was just a handful of people, but I kept pushing. I sent emails, made cold calls, and even went to local meetups to network with people who might be interested in what I was building. Slowly but surely, the user base grew. By the end of the first year, I had 1,000 users. It wasn't a huge number, but it was enough to give me hope that this could actually work. The app was still far from perfect, but I was making improvements based on user feedback, and the community around it was growing. I even managed to secure a small investment from an angel investor who was interested in what I was building. With that investment, I was able to hire a few people to help me with development and marketing. Things were starting to look up, but then disaster struck. A bug in the code caused the app to crash for several hours, and users started complaining. I woke up to hundreds of angry messages, and I felt like I had failed. It was my worst nightmare come true. The app was down, and users were frustrated. I had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it felt like it was all going to fall apart. That day, I learned a valuable lesson. Failure isn't the end, it's just part of the process. Instead of dwelling on the problem, I got to work fixing the bug. I stayed up for 48 hours straight, fixing code and communicating with users to keep them updated. By the end of the week, the issue was resolved, and I had regained the trust of my users. It wasn't easy, but it was a turning point for me. I realized that setbacks are inevitable, but what matters most is how you respond to them. In the years that followed, the app continued to grow. We added more features, improved the user experience, and gained traction with new users. Eventually, we were able to monetize the app through a subscription model. It wasn't a huge success right away, but over time, it became a steady source of income. The real breakthrough came when we were featured in a major tech publication. That's when things exploded. Users flocked to the app, and revenue started pouring in. We grew from a small team of 3 to a company of over 50 employees. We expanded our app to include new tools like task management and team collaboration features, and it became a staple in many people's daily routines. Looking back, I never could have predicted where this journey would take me. I had no business experience, no formal training in tech, and no safety net to fall back on. But I had one thing that kept me going: the belief that I could build something better. There were times when I wanted to quit, when I felt like I was in over my head, but I pushed through. And now, I get to wake up every day knowing that I built something that helps people and that I followed my own path, even when it was scary. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you have all the answers. Just start. The rest will come. And when things get tough, remember that failure is just part of the process. It's the resilience to keep going that makes all the difference. Today, the app once started in my tiny apartment is used by millions of people around the world. It's not perfect, and we still face challenges every day, but it's mine. And that's more than I ever expected when I dropped out of college and left the life everyone thought I was supposed to live. I had always been a dreamer. Growing up, I often fantasized about having my own business, calling the shots, and not having to answer to anyone. But like many people, I didn't know where to start. I didn't have an MBA. I wasn't from a family of entrepreneurs, and honestly, I had no idea how the hell I was going to get there. But through a combination of luck, relentless hustle, and sheer stupidity, I ended up building a small but successful company. Let me start from the beginning. It all started in my mid-20s. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing, which was a solid degree, but didn't exactly scream entrepreneurial genius. I found myself stuck in a low-paying job at a mid-sized ad agency. The work was boring, and I spent most of my days staring at a computer screen, tweaking social media posts for clients who could barely care less about their online presence. I started to feel like I was wasting my life. My salary was decent, but it wasn't enough to feel fulfilled. I wasn't changing the world. I wasn't even changing my own life. I was just getting by. Then one day, while I was scrolling through Twitter, I saw an ad for a course on dropshipping. At the time, I had no idea what dropshipping even was. But I clicked on the link anyway. The course promised to teach you how to build an online store and sell products without ever having to touch the products themselves. I thought, this sounds like it could be a way out. A way to actually build something for myself. So, I pulled the trigger and spent a few $100s on the course. At the time, I was hesitant, but I figured it was a small investment in a big dream. The first few weeks were an absolute roller coaster. I was working full-time during the day, and then I would come home and spend hours working on this dropshipping business at night. The course was pretty basic, but it gave me the foundation I needed. I picked a niche, health supplements, which I thought was a hot market, built a website, and connected with suppliers. I was burning the candle at both ends, but I was determined. After a few weeks, I launched the site. I remember the first day, I opened up the website to check if anyone had bought anything. It was such a rush. Seeing that first sale come through was like winning the lottery. My heart raced. I had done it. I was officially an entrepreneur. Even though the sale was only $4.30, I was elated. I had created something that someone else wanted to buy. But here's the thing no one tells you about starting a business. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. The first month, I barely made any sales. The second month was even worse. I was pouring money into Facebook ads, Google ads, and Instagram promotions, but the return on investment was non-existent. I spent hours tinkering with the website, trying to improve the user experience, and fiddling with my product descriptions. I had no idea what I was doing, and it felt like I was just throwing money into a black hole. I was about to give up. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my computer screen, with hundreds of dollars gone and zero sales coming in. I was thinking, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe I should just go back to my boring 9 to 5 and accept that this is my life. But then something clicked. I realized that I wasn't going to get anywhere by just throwing money at the problem. I needed to start thinking smarter, not harder. I revisited the course, dug into the strategies that other successful entrepreneurs were using, and began to experiment. Here's where I turned the corner. I switched my strategy to content marketing. I started writing blog posts about health and wellness, creating informative and engaging content that linked back to my products. I used SEO to optimize my website for search engines, and I began posting consistently on Instagram with fitness tips and motivational quotes. Slowly but surely, my traffic started to increase. A few months later, I was seeing actual results. My website started getting steady traffic, and with the right content, I was finally converting visitors into customers. I was making a small profit, but it was enough to keep me going. I had learned how to balance ads with organic content. I realized that this wasn't just a quick hustle, I was building a brand. Over time, the business grew. I expanded my product range, added customer reviews, and offered discounts to repeat buyers. I reached out to fitness influencers and got them to promote my products, which helped boost my credibility. Things were starting to click. I began to realize that success in business isn't just about having the best product. It's about having a good system, being patient, and learning from your mistakes. Fast forward 2 years, and my dropshipping business was generating 6 figures a year in revenue. I was still working my full-time job, but I was able to slowly transition to running the business full-time. I hired a team of virtual assistants to help with customer service, social media management, and product sourcing. By the time I quit my job, I had reached a point where I was confident that the business could sustain me. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many times I wanted to give up. So many nights I wondered if I was chasing a pipe dream. But through persistence, learning from my mistakes, and constantly adapting, I managed to build something from nothing. I'm not going to lie and say it was easy. There were days when I felt like a failure. There were months where I was barely scraping by. There were plenty of mistakes I made along the way, and I lost money in the process. But I never stopped learning. I kept evolving, kept testing, and kept pushing forward. And that's what made all the difference. Today, I've taken things a step further. I'm no longer just in the health supplement space. I've expanded into other niches, and my company is thriving. I've learned that entrepreneurship is less about luck and more about grit. It's about showing up every day and doing the work, even when you don't feel like it. And above all, it's about taking risks, learning from your failures, and never quitting. So, if you're sitting on the fence, wondering whether you should take the leap, my advice is simple: go for it. If you fail, you'll learn something that will help you succeed the next time. And if you succeed, you'll look back and realize that the struggle was worth every moment. In the end, it wasn't just the business I built that made me proud. It was the person I became in the process. I remember the first time I decided to start my own business. It wasn't some grand, life-changing moment that sparked the idea. It was more like a whisper that grew into a shout as time went on. At first, I didn't even believe it. I had always been someone who followed the conventional path: graduate college, get a stable job, work 9 to 5, rinse and repeat. But all of that began to feel hollow, like I was a hamster on a wheel, constantly moving but never going anywhere. I had a good job in marketing at a mid-sized tech company, and for a while, I was content. But deep down, I had this nagging feeling that I wasn't doing what I was meant to do. I started to look around at other entrepreneurs. Some were killing it, others were struggling, But they all had one thing in common. They had control over their own destiny. They weren't waiting for someone to hand them a promotion or a raise. They were creating opportunities for themselves. That was the tipping point. I couldn't ignore the pull anymore. I started dreaming of my own business. But what would I do? That was the million-dollar question. I had a bit of experience in marketing and digital strategy, and I loved working with small businesses. After talking to a few friends who owned their own shops, I realized something. There were so many small businesses out there struggling to figure out their marketing. They didn't have big budgets or fancy teams to handle things for them, but they still needed to grow. And that's when the idea hit me. I could help them. I could offer affordable, effective marketing solutions that weren't just cookie-cutter plans, but tailored to their unique needs. It wasn't going to be easy, though. I had no real savings to fall back on, and I was terrified of what people would think. What if I failed? What if my friends and family saw me as someone who couldn't hold down a regular job? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living a life that felt like a dress rehearsal. If I was going to make a real impact, I had to take a chance. I spent months planning, researching, and building the groundwork for my business. I built a website, created social media profiles, and started reaching out to local businesses to offer my services. At first, it was a tough sell. Most small business owners didn't understand why they needed professional marketing help. They figured they could handle it themselves, or just put up a few ads on Facebook and call it a day. But I was persistent. I offered free consultations, and slowly but surely, I started landing clients. It was a rough start. I remember one of my first clients was a local bakery. They had a great product, but they weren't getting enough foot traffic. I came in, analyzed their marketing strategy, and made a few key recommendations. Within a couple of months, their sales had jumped by 30%. That was my first real success, and it felt like a validation of everything I had been working for. But with success came new challenges. I had no idea how to manage a business. I was just a marketing guy who had stumbled into entrepreneurship. Suddenly, I was juggling clients, managing my own books, and trying to scale. I had to learn everything the hard way. I spent hours reading books, taking online courses, and attending webinars. I made a ton of mistakes, and sometimes I felt like I was in way over my head, but I kept going. Over time, things started to pick up. I brought on a couple of part-time employees to help with the workload, and I expanded my client base. By my second year in business, I had enough revenue to quit my full-time job. It was a terrifying moment, quitting the security of a steady paycheck to go all in on my own venture. But it also felt exhilarating. For the first time, I truly felt like I was in control of my future. One of the biggest challenges I faced during this period was learning to manage people. It's one thing to be your own boss, but it's another thing entirely to be the boss of others. My first employee was a guy named Mark. He was a talented designer, but he wasn't great at communicating. I found myself constantly having to remind him about deadlines and explain things in more detail than I wanted. It created tension, and for a while, I wasn't sure how to handle it. But I learned that being a good manager wasn't just about getting things done. It was about building relationships, setting clear expectations, and fostering a positive work environment. Once I got the hang of it, the business really started to run more smoothly. One of the turning points for my business came when I realized that I wasn't just a marketing consultant, I was an entrepreneur. I needed to start thinking bigger. I began expanding my services and offering more comprehensive packages that included everything from website design to social media management. I also started looking into automation tools that could help me scale without burning myself out. One of the best investments I made was in an automated email marketing platform. It allowed me to create personalized email campaigns that reached my clients' customers at just the right time, without me having to manually send every single email. The results were incredible, and my clients were thrilled with the ROI. By the end of my third year in business, I had a small but solid team and a steady stream of clients. But I wasn't done yet. I had bigger dreams. I wanted to expand to new markets, offer more services, and ultimately grow my business into something that could run without me being involved in every single detail. I started outsourcing tasks that weren't essential to my skill set and focused more on the strategic direction of the company. This shift was difficult because I had always been hands-on, but it was necessary for growth. I had to trust my team and let go of control in order to scale. Now, 5 years into running my business, I look back and marvel at how far I've come. It hasn't been easy. There have been sleepless nights, financial struggles, and moments when I doubted myself. But the rewards have been worth it. I've built a company that I'm proud of, and I've created jobs for other people who are just as passionate about what they do as I am. The most important lesson I've learned throughout this journey is that failure isn't the end, it's just part of the process. Every setback, every mistake, every moment of doubt has taught me something valuable. And the biggest lesson of all is that if you're willing to take risks, learn from your failures, and keep pushing forward, you can achieve things you never thought possible. I grew up in a small town where dreams seemed distant, like stars out of reach. We didn't have much, just enough to scrape by. My parents worked hard but never seemed to get ahead. We didn't have the luxury of thinking big. We had to think practical, just to make it through the day. But from a young age, I had a different vision. I didn't want to follow the same path that everyone around me was taking. I didn't want to just get by. I wanted to build something that would change my life and hopefully, the lives of those around me. It all started in high school when I got my first job at a local grocery store. I was 16 and wanted to make some extra cash for things like gas and hanging out with friends. At first, it was just a way to earn a paycheck. But something about that job changed my perspective. I would watch customers, some of them regulars, come in and out every day. They'd spend their hard-earned money on groceries and things they needed. But I started thinking, what if I could offer something different? What if I could create a business that solved a problem, something people actually needed, and at the same time, built a community? That thought lingered with me for a while. I didn't know exactly what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew it had to be something unique. I wasn't interested in following in my parents' footsteps, working a 9-to-5 job that barely made ends meet. I wanted to take a risk. But the thing is, at the time, I didn't have the faintest clue about what entrepreneurship really entailed. I had no money, no network, and no experience. But I did have something that was more important: drive and determination. After high school, I went off to college, unsure of what to major in. I liked technology and business, so I thought, why not try both? I ended up majoring in business administration with a focus on entrepreneurship. I figured I might as well learn the basics while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. To be honest, I didn't have much faith in the college system. It felt like everyone around me was just ticking boxes and memorizing information for tests, and I wasn't sure how any of it would help me start a business. But I stuck it out because I thought maybe the connections and resources would be worth it in the end. By the time I was a junior, I had a pretty solid grasp of business fundamentals. But I still didn't know what kind of business I should start. It was frustrating. I didn't want to go into debt trying out something that could fail, but I also didn't want to waste my time. Around that time, I came across a problem that hit me right in the gut. My friend group was constantly struggling with staying on top of our schedules and managing our time. We'd miss classes, forget to study for exams, or double book ourselves. That's when it hit me. People are busy, especially college students, and they needed something that could help them stay organized. Not just any organization tool, but something that actually helped them be productive. So, I decided to develop a productivity app. But the problem was, I didn't know how to code. I could do basic website stuff, but building an app from scratch seemed like an impossible task. But I wasn't about to give up. I found an online course on coding and spent the next few months learning how to create a simple app. I remember sitting in my dorm room, staring at my screen late at night, feeling like I was in way over my head. But slowly, I began piecing things together. I wasn't building anything complicated yet, just something simple, a basic to-do list that could sync across multiple devices. But the idea wasn't the app itself. It was the way I thought it could evolve into something more robust. I started testing it out with my friends and family, and they liked it. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. They were excited to have an app that helped them stay on track, and their positive feedback pushed me to keep going. I had an idea, but I needed help bringing it to life. I started reaching out to other college students who were coding in their spare time. Some were intrigued by my idea and offered to help me, but most weren't interested in working for free. I didn't have the funds to hire anyone, but I didn't let that stop me. I found a freelance developer online who was willing to work on my project for a small equity stake. The first version of my app was a disaster. The user interface was clunky, the features barely worked, and it crashed more times than I could count. But I wasn't discouraged. I put in more hours, learned from my mistakes, and kept making improvements. After months of trial and error, we had a product that, while still rough around the edges, was functional. And then came the next big challenge, getting people to use it. I didn't have a marketing budget. I couldn't afford to pay influencers or run ads. So I did what any broke college kid would do. I hustled. I started posting on Reddit, Twitter, and any other platform I could think of. I reached out to professors, asking if I could share the app with their students. I offered free premium versions to people who gave me honest feedback. Slowly, users began to trickle in. I had a few hundred downloads within a month, but it wasn't enough to sustain the development costs. I was running out of money. That's when I had my first breakthrough. A tech blogger stumbled upon my app and wrote a post about it. Traffic to the website skyrocketed, and with it came new users. It wasn't an overnight success, but it was a sign that things were moving in the right direction. By the time I graduated, my app had gained a decent following, enough to show potential investors that it could be something bigger. I spent the next year working on scaling the app. I went to investor meetings, pitched my idea, and faced rejection after rejection. But I kept tweaking the business model, adjusting the app based on feedback, and refining the pitch. Eventually, I found an investor who believed in me and my vision. With their help, I was able to quit my day job and focus entirely on my startup. Fast forward 5 years. The app became one of the top-rated productivity tools in the market, with millions of active users. I had a team of developers, marketers, and customer support agents working with me to expand and improve the platform. The journey wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought about giving up, but I never did. I learned a lot along the way: how to fail, how to pivot, and how to keep going when everything seems impossible. What started as a simple idea in a dorm room turned into a company that's changing how people stay organized and productive. I didn't take a traditional path. I didn't follow the rules. But I kept pushing forward, and I learned that sometimes all it takes is a little bit of belief, a lot of hard work, and the willingness to risk it all to make your dreams a reality. It wasn't about being the smartest or having the most resources. It was about having the courage to take the leap when others would hesitate. And now, as I sit at my desk in a small office with a team of people who share my passion, I can't help but think back to those early days when I had no idea what I was doing. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I might not have had much, but I had the one thing that mattered most: the drive to make it happen. I've always been the type of person who enjoys the thrill of taking risks, so it shouldn't have come as a surprise when I decided to quit my steady job in 2015 and start my own business. The road to entrepreneurship, however, wasn't as glamorous as I initially thought, and there were more bumps than I'd ever anticipated. But looking back now, those struggles are the very things that made the success I've found all the more rewarding. It all started in my mid-20s. I had been working in marketing for a relatively large company for a few years. The job was fine, the pay was decent, but something was missing. Every day felt like I was just going through the motions. I'd heard a lot of stories about people who had taken the plunge into business and made it big, but deep down, I knew it was more than just blind luck. It was about grit, resilience, and, most importantly, timing. At the time, I had no specific product or service in mind, but I'd always been interested in tech and the growing field of e-commerce. There was something about the idea of creating a business that didn't rely on a physical storefront or traditional office space that appealed to me. I wanted to leverage the internet to build something that could grow without the limitations of a fixed location. I'll admit, when I first told my friends and family about my idea, most of them were skeptical. My parents, in particular, were concerned. Why leave a stable job for something that could fail? My dad asked. And honestly, I didn't have a solid answer at the time. It was more of a gut feeling that this was the direction I was meant to take. There's a certain freedom that comes with entrepreneurship, and that was the pull for me. I spent the next few months doing research. I dove deep into learning about e-commerce platforms, digital marketing, social media strategies, and everything in between. The more I learned, the more I felt empowered. I finally settled on selling custom products, specifically custom-designed phone cases. It seemed simple enough, but with a unique twist: the ability for customers to upload their own artwork and designs to be printed on the cases. By the time I was ready to launch, I had a basic website built, and I partnered with a printing company that could produce the cases on demand. This meant I wouldn't need to invest in large quantities of inventory upfront, which eased some of my financial anxiety. All I had to do was drive traffic to the site and let the sales roll in. I wish I could tell you that it was an instant success, but it wasn't. The first few months were brutal. I barely made enough to cover the hosting fees for my website. I was pouring all my savings into digital advertising, experimenting with Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, and Google search campaigns. Most of them didn't convert, and I was running out of ideas and money. In one of my darkest moments, I almost gave up. I remember sitting on my couch at 3 a.m., staring at my laptop, wondering if I was just fooling myself. I felt like I was sinking into a hole, and no matter how hard I worked, the hole was only getting deeper. But I knew that if I didn't push through, I would regret it forever. I figured the worst that could happen was that I would lose the money I'd put in, and that was a risk I was willing to take. I took a step back and reassessed everything. I looked at what other successful entrepreneurs were doing, and one thing that stood out was their ability to adapt quickly. I realized that I needed to refine my brand, clarify my message, and focus on a specific target audience. My initial approach had been too broad. I was trying to sell to everyone, but I hadn't figured out who my ideal customer was. That's when I decided to narrow my focus to one demographic: artists and designers who wanted to showcase their work on custom products. I began reaching out to influencers in the art community and offering them free phone cases with their artwork printed on them in exchange for exposure. Slowly but surely, people started taking notice. Their followers began visiting my site, and sales started to trickle in. I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, as the business began to grow, new challenges emerged. I had underestimated how time-consuming it would be to handle customer service. There were complaints about delays, missing orders, and quality control issues. At the time, I was running everything myself, from marketing to processing orders and dealing with customer complaints. The stress was overwhelming, and I quickly realized I couldn't keep up with everything. That's when I made my first hire. I brought on a part-time virtual assistant to handle customer service, and that was a game changer. With more time on my hands, I was able to focus on scaling the business. I began experimenting with new marketing strategies, testing different designs, and expanding my product range. I also learned to outsource things like website development, content creation, and packaging. As I built a team, I also focused on streamlining operations. I invested in better software to track inventory, manage orders, and automate some of the tedious tasks. Things started to feel more manageable, and I could focus on the bigger picture, growing the business and developing new partnerships. Over the next couple of years, my company grew steadily. We moved beyond phone cases and started offering custom apparel, tote bags, and other accessories. The more we diversified, the more our customer base expanded. By 2019, we had a small team of employees, and the business was generating enough revenue that I could finally pay myself a decent salary. But success didn't come without its challenges. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, we faced a massive setback. Orders plummeted as people started holding back on discretionary spending. I had to make some tough decisions, including temporarily laying off some of my team members and pivoting the business to focus on products that people would want to buy in a more financially uncertain environment. I also doubled down on our digital marketing efforts, refining our ads and promotions to fit the new reality. It wasn't easy, but the adjustments paid off. By the end of 2020, our business was not only back on track but stronger than ever. Looking back on my journey, I realized that there's no secret formula to success. Entrepreneurship is about resilience, learning from mistakes, and being willing to adjust when things don't go as planned. In fact, my failures were often my greatest teachers. Today, my company is doing well, and I've even expanded into new markets. We're a small but passionate team, and every day I wake up excited about the work we're doing. I'm still involved in every aspect of the business, but I've learned to delegate more and trust my team. The road to entrepreneurship wasn't easy, but it's been worth every challenge. It all started back in 2016 when I had just graduated from college. I had a degree in business, but no clear idea of what I wanted to do. I felt lost in the world, especially because every one of my friends seemed to have a plan. Some were heading off to law school, others had job offers from big companies, and here I was, just trying to figure out how to make a living. I spent most of my time either applying for jobs that I didn't really care about or feeling frustrated about not knowing what to do with my life. One day, out of sheer desperation, I signed up for an online business course. It wasn't a full-fledged MBA or anything fancy, it was just a course about digital marketing. I'd heard people say that digital marketing was the future, and given that most businesses had some form of online presence, it seemed like a good start. The course itself wasn't anything revolutionary, but it sparked something inside me. I suddenly understood how much potential there was in online platforms. I realized that anyone, anywhere, with the right skills could create something from nothing. That's when I had my first aha moment. If everyone was spending time online, maybe I could create a business around that. I didn't know exactly what kind of business I wanted to run, but I started to consider the possibility of doing something in e-commerce. It was the perfect fit. I had always been interested in products, and the idea of running an online store seemed like something I could at least try. I didn't have much money to invest in this idea. I had just enough savings to get by for a few months, but it wasn't nearly enough to buy inventory or run a fully fledged business. So, I started small. I decided to build a dropshipping business. For those who aren't familiar, dropshipping is a method where you sell products through an online store, but you don't keep any inventory. Instead, when someone places an order, you forward that order to a supplier, who ships the product directly to the customer. The concept sounded easy, but I quickly realized how much work was involved in building and growing a successful online store. At first, I had no idea how to build a website. I knew nothing about SEO, search engine optimization, marketing, or any of the other aspects of running an e-commerce business. My first few attempts were a disaster. I created a store using a free website builder, picked random products to sell, and put up a few ads. For a while, nothing happened. I barely got any traffic, and no one bought anything. I was disheartened, but refused to quit. I started researching. I spent hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts. One thing I realized was that the key to success wasn't just having a website or a product. It was about targeting the right audience and building trust. I spent a lot of time figuring out who my target customers were and how to reach them. I revamped my website and focused on creating a more professional-looking store with better branding. I researched the best products to sell and how to market them effectively. It wasn't until I ran my first Facebook ad that I started to see results. I was careful with my targeting, and within a week, I had my first sale. It wasn't much, a single $15 item, but it was a breakthrough. It meant that my store was working, and I had figured out how to attract people to it. I didn't stop there. I refined my ads, improved my website, and tested new products. Slowly but surely, sales started to pick up. I was reinvesting every penny I made back into the business. I hired freelancers to help with the design and marketing, and I started building an email list. By the end of my first year, I had managed to scale my dropshipping store to a point where I was making around $5,000 a month in profit. It wasn't enough to quit my day job, but it was a solid foundation. But the real breakthrough came when I realized I had been too focused on dropshipping. I started to hear stories of entrepreneurs who built brands around their products. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that dropshipping was only a temporary solution. I needed to create something with long-term potential. I wanted to build a real brand, one that people trusted. So, I made the decision to pivot. I stopped relying on dropshipping suppliers and started sourcing my products directly. I found a supplier that could provide higher quality products at a better price, and I started to create a unique product line. I also focused on branding. I wanted my customers to feel like they were buying something special, something that wasn't just another generic item they could find anywhere. I used the profits from my dropshipping business to fund the new brand, and within a year, it had taken off. By 2019, my company was doing $100,000 a month in revenue. It felt unreal. The business I had started from nothing had grown into a legitimate company, and I had learned so much along the way. But even with the success, I faced new challenges. Scaling up meant more employees, bigger operations, and more stress. I had to learn how to manage people, navigate complex logistics, and deal with customer service issues. There were times when I felt like I was in over my head, and I wanted to quit. But I had come so far, and I refused to give up. As the business grew, I started to think about the bigger picture. I wanted to create a company that not only made money, but also had a positive impact on the world. I began to focus on sustainability, making sure that my products were ethically sourced and that my business operations minimized waste. I partnered with charities and started donating a portion of the profits to causes I cared about. By 2021, the company was generating over $500,000 in monthly revenue. I had a dedicated team, and I was able to step back from day-to-day operations. I had built something I was proud of, something that had gone beyond just making money. It had become a business that aligned with my values, and I felt fulfilled in a way that I never had before. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I felt like giving up, when it seemed like everything was against me. But through perseverance and a willingness to learn, I built something that changed my life. It's not just about the money, it's about the journey, the lessons learned, and the people I've met along the way. Now, I'm in a position where I can help other entrepreneurs. I've started mentoring others, offering advice, and sharing the lessons I learned. I'm also in the process of launching a second business, one that I hope will be even more impactful than the first. And while I don't have all the answers, I know one thing for sure. The road to success is never a straight line, but if you keep pushing forward, you'll eventually find your way. Entrepreneurship is tough, and it's not for everyone. But if you have the grit and determination to keep going, it can also be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life. And if I can do it, so can you. Keep going, and good things will happen. It was the summer of 2015 when I, a fresh college graduate with little to no savings and a mind full of ambition, decided to embark on a journey that would change my life forever. I had no clue about business or how to even start a company, but I knew one thing. I wanted to create something of my own. I wasn't the kind of person who wanted to work a 9-to-5 job, grinding away in a cubicle for someone else's dream. I wanted my own. The idea came to me randomly, like most good ideas do, while I was walking through a park one afternoon. I had recently been using fitness apps to track my workouts, but there was something about them that felt incomplete. The apps were too generic, and none of them truly captured the essence of what it meant to live a balanced, healthy life. I'd been an athlete in college, and while I wasn't in peak physical condition anymore, I still believed in the importance of fitness and a healthy lifestyle. I started thinking about it. What if there was an app that not only helped you track your workouts but also focused on overall wellness, mental health, nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, and even personal growth? It wouldn't just be about lifting weights or running. It would be a holistic approach to fitness. I had no experience in app development, and I barely understood how to code, but I believed in the idea enough to go after it. I wasn't sure how, but I was determined to figure it out. The first thing I did was start learning. I spent hours each day reading about app development, design, and the tech industry. I scoured forums, watched countless YouTube tutorials, and read blog posts from entrepreneurs who had been there before. I knew that if I wanted to bring this idea to life, I needed to understand the process. I also realized that I needed a team, something I had zero of at the time. My first step was reaching out to my network. I found an old friend from high school who had become a software developer, and after some convincing, he agreed to join me. I was transparent with him about the fact that I had no funding and no clear plan, but I had a vision and a passion that I believed in. He, too, shared the same values about health and wellness, so he agreed to take the plunge with me. I remember the excitement I felt the first time we sat down to work on the idea. We were both in his tiny apartment, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and soda cans. There was no fancy office, no big investors, no team of employees, just two people with a shared dream. We started brainstorming. We named the app FitMind, focusing on the connection between physical fitness and mental wellness. The development process was excruciating. There were countless nights of frustration, failure, and self-doubt. Every line of code felt like it took a week to write, and there were more bugs than I could count. We'd go days without making significant progress, and I began to wonder if this dream was just that, a dream that wouldn't come to fruition. My friend and I would argue over designs, features, and how to approach the user experience. I thought about giving up more times than I care to admit. Then came the first breakthrough. After months of hard work, we finally had a working prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. I remember the first time I opened it on my phone, and there it was, our creation. It was a small, basic version of what we had envisioned, but it felt like a massive accomplishment. We didn't have any investors, so every penny we spent was out of our own pockets. But that first step felt like we were on the right path. With our prototype in hand, we decided to take the next step, launch a crowdfunding campaign. We created a detailed pitch video that explained the vision behind the app and what we hoped to achieve. I had never done anything like this before, but I threw myself into it. I spent days writing, filming, and editing, working alongside my friend to make sure everything was polished and professional. I knew that without funds, we wouldn't be able to make it to the next stage of development. We launched the campaign, and for the first few days, it felt like no one was paying attention. The donations trickled in slowly. The pressure was mounting, and I started doubting myself again. But then, as if by magic, things started to shift. A couple of fitness influencers got hold of the campaign, and they shared it with their followers. The floodgates opened. We went from raising a few $100s to thousands in a matter of days. People were genuinely excited about our idea. We hit our funding goal in just under 2 weeks, which was surreal. I had never expected it to take off so quickly. With the funds in place, we were able to bring on additional developers and designers, and we began to build the app at full speed. We spent the next few months polishing the app, ironing out bugs, and adding features that we had only dreamed about at first. By the time we were ready for a soft launch, it felt like the culmination of years of effort. We had a fully functional version of FitMind, and I was excited but also terrified. What if no one used it? What if the feedback was overwhelmingly negative? To our surprise, the launch went better than expected. Users loved the app's focus on overall wellness. They appreciated the mindfulness exercises, the nutrition tracking, and the community feature that allowed people to connect with others on the same fitness journey. We weren't just another fitness app. We were something different, something that resonated with people on a deeper level. Over the next year, we worked tirelessly to improve FitMind. We listened to our users' feedback and made constant updates, refining the experience. Slowly but surely, the app began to grow. We reached our first 100,000 downloads, then 500,000, and eventually over 1 million users. We began generating revenue through premium memberships and partnerships with health brands. However, the journey wasn't without its challenges. We faced competitors who tried to copy our model, and there were moments when I felt the weight of running a business. The stress of managing a growing company, handling employees, and ensuring that we stayed ahead of the competition was overwhelming. But I had learned to embrace the challenges, and I had surrounded myself with a team that shared my vision. Fast forward to today, and FitMind is now a household name in the wellness industry. It's not just an app, it's a community. We have a full team, a proper office, and even investors who believe in our mission. The journey hasn't been easy, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. If I hadn't taken that first step, if I hadn't believed in myself when everyone else doubted, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, take it from me. It's not going to be easy, and there will be moments where you'll want to give up. But if you stay committed, if you keep pushing forward, the rewards can be incredible. I took a chance on an idea, and that idea turned into something that changed my life and the lives of millions of others. Don't let fear hold you back. You have to believe in your vision, even when no one else does. I was 22 when I first started my entrepreneurial journey. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing. Like many of my peers, I was told that I had to get a real job, a 9 to 5 with a stable paycheck and benefits. But deep down, I always knew I wasn't built for that kind of life. I wanted to create something of my own, something that mattered to me. What I didn't realize at the time was how difficult it would be and how many mistakes I would make along the way. The idea for my business came from an obsession with tech gadgets. I had always been fascinated with new technology, especially wearable tech. Smartwatches, fitness trackers, and wireless earbuds were becoming all the rage, and I couldn't help but dive into the world of them. One day, I noticed something while browsing through a tech store. I saw a smartwatch with all the bells and whistles, but the strap was uncomfortable and didn't look good. I thought, why isn't anyone making high-quality, fashionable, and comfortable straps for these watches? That was the seed for my business idea, a line of premium, customizable smartwatch bands. I had no experience in design or manufacturing, but I was determined. I spent months researching, learning about different materials, production processes, and even how to market a product. I would spend late nights Googling everything from leather crafting to digital marketing strategies. It was exhausting, but every time I learned something new, it felt like a step closer to making my dream a reality. I spent my savings, about $3,000, on initial prototypes. I found a manufacturer overseas who could produce the straps, and I worked with a designer to create the first few styles. To say I was excited when the samples arrived would be an understatement. I remember opening the box and holding the first completed strap in my hands. It felt real. My vision was starting to take shape. Then came the harsh reality check. I had no idea how to sell this product. I thought, I'll just put up a website and people will come. It sounded so simple in my head, but the truth was far from it. I spent countless hours building the website, which, in hindsight, was atrocious. I had no experience with web design, and it showed. The layout was clunky, the images were blurry, and the copy was boring. But still, I launched it, thinking I'd see sales pouring in. They didn't. Not even close. I had no social media following, no brand recognition, and no marketing strategy. The product just sat there, gathering virtual dust. I thought about quitting. Many times. There were weeks when I didn't even check my website because it felt like a failure. But I kept going, even when it seemed pointless. One day, I came across a Reddit post where someone was asking for recommendations on smartwatch bands. I saw this as my chance. I commented, telling the person about my brand and why our bands were different. I included a link to my site, and to my surprise, the person responded saying they checked out the website and were intrigued. They even asked a few questions about the materials and customization options. This exchange sparked something in me. It wasn't much, but it was a tiny spark of interest. I decided to get more proactive with Reddit. I started participating in relevant subreddits, providing value where I could. I didn't just advertise my product. I gave tips on how to care for smartwatches, how to pick the right strap, and how to get the most out of wearable tech. Slowly, people started noticing. I gained a few followers here and there. They weren't customers yet, but they were curious. After a few months of grinding it out on Reddit, Instagram, and Facebook, my sales slowly started picking up. I realized I had underestimated the power of social media. I learned the hard way that advertising doesn't work unless you're creating a community around your brand. People didn't just want to buy a strap, they wanted to be part of something. That's when I started focusing on building a brand identity. I hired a photographer and did a photo shoot with models showing off the straps in real-life settings. I started running small ads targeting tech enthusiasts and smartwatch owners. The first month, I made $500 in sales, and I felt like I had won the lottery. It wasn't much, but it was proof that my idea had potential. Over the next few months, I reinvested every penny into improving the product, enhancing the website, and scaling my marketing efforts. Slowly, the business began to grow. Fast forward 2 years. I'm now running a small but successful business. I've expanded my product line to include not just smartwatch bands, but also accessories like phone cases and charging docks. I've got a team of 5 people helping with customer service, inventory, and marketing. We've grown from a side hustle into a legitimate business, with 6-figure revenue last year. Along the way, I've learned a lot about what it really takes to succeed as an entrepreneur. I've learned that it's not about having a perfect product or a flawless marketing plan. It's about persistence and adaptability. You'll make mistakes. You'll have failures. But what separates the successful from the ones who give up is the ability to learn from those mistakes and keep going. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned is the importance of customer feedback. At the start, I thought I knew exactly what customers wanted, but I was wrong. The feedback I received helped me iterate and improve my products. People weren't just buying straps. They were looking for something that reflected their personality, something they could customize. So I started offering more options and color schemes, allowing people to design their own straps. That's when sales really began to soar. Another lesson I've learned is the power of partnerships. I eventually reached out to influencers in the tech and fitness spaces. I offered them free products in exchange for honest reviews and shoutouts. Some of them agreed, and their endorsement helped boost our credibility. It wasn't about paying for followers or likes. It was about building genuine relationships with people who believed in my product. I've also learned the importance of balance. Entrepreneurship can be all-consuming, and there were times when I worked 70-hour weeks and neglected my mental health and relationships. But I've realized that you can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself and finding time for the people you care about is just as important as the business itself. If I could give any advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, it would be this: don't expect it to be easy, and don't expect it to happen overnight. There will be times when you feel like quitting. There will be moments when you wonder if you're wasting your time and money. But if you stay persistent, keep learning, and adapt as you go, success will eventually come. It might not look the way you expected, but it will come. Starting a business isn't a straight line. It's a winding road full of bumps and detours. But if you're willing to stick it out, the journey can be incredibly rewarding. I'm proud of what I've built, but I'm also excited for what the future holds. There's always more to learn, more to create, and more people to help. And that's what keeps me going every single day. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.